Before I had announced to the world that I was going to be making these online videos for Doctor Who, I posted this picture onto Twitter of me hanging out on the Tardis with writer Neil Gaiman. But why was I hanging out on the Tardis with Neil Gaiman, you ask, probably? Well, to ask him some questions about Doctor Who. But before we get into our chat, if you don't know who Neil is, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, lovely people at home, and you're looking particularly lovely today. I'm Neil Gaiman, and I write stuff.
Neil's been a fan of Doctor Who for much longer than I have, since the 60s, and apparently he's been a fan of it for much younger than I was as well, since nursery school.
We used to get these little bottles of milk, and you would drink your little bottle of milk, and then you would bend the straw over, and it would be a Dalek. And we'd just be sitting there going, exterminate, exterminate.
Everybody has their Doctor. For me, it's probably David Tennant, but for him, it was the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton.
He was the Doctor for me. He was my Doctor. And then John Pertwee was an actor playing the Doctor, but he was still sort of the Doctor, and so was Tom Baker, and by that point, you know, by Peter Davison, no, it was just a guy playing a character. I
feel like now, with Matt Smith, that new Doctor Who fans are having to do the same thing. You have to get used to the idea that he's the Doctor now. So I found it interesting that it's always been like that. The thing that you find with writers for Doctor Who is that, first and foremost, they're just massive fans of the show, and I think you can get much better episodes out of those people who are just, you know, really, really big fans and excited to write an episode.
This is my piece of fan fiction. Yeah. This really is. This is, I love Doctor Who. I've loved Doctor Who since I was a kid. This TARDIS had not been designed the first time I wrote Interior TARDIS. It was magic.
If you know anything about what Neil Gaiman's written before, then you know that he's Neil Gaiman, and getting Neil Gaiman to write an episode of Doctor Who might have been quite an arduous task, but apparently not.
I just emailed Stephen Moffat and said, let's have dinner. And so we did.
Making your own opportunity.
And halfway through the dinner, you know, it was a very strange dinner because I kept saying things like, hypothetically speaking, were anybody to ask me to write a Doctor Who, I would, of course, do it. I'd write it. Yes, yes. But I didn't say that. I was very, very cool about it. And you know, halfway through the meal, he said, "Okay, look, you know, I know that you know that I'm going to take over, and I know that you want to. So stop beating around the bush. Do you want to write a Doctor Who?" I phoned him up a couple of months later and said, "I've got an idea," and told him my idea, and he said, "Yes, I like it." And the great thing about having my idea that early was that I could say things like, can we keep the old TARDIS set around?
Not only is Neil taking us back to the old TARDIS, but he's also taking us to bits of the new TARDIS that you don't usually get to see.
One of the things that you always ask yourself if you watch Doctor Who is just what's it like further inside the TARDIS? With some Doctors, with Tom Baker at one point, with William Hartnell at one point, with Peter Davison, we got in and we saw certain rooms. But there isn't any TARDIS corridor. You know, now there is.
So are we having fun yet? I'm rather enjoying the sensation of having you running around inside me. I've turned off the corridor anti-grav, so do be careful.
Originally, Neil's episode was going to end up in the 5th series, but because it got pushed back to the 6th, he had the opportunity to watch the 5th series, study Matt Smith, and write lines just for Matt's Doctor.
The Doctor at the end turns to Amy and Rory and says, "Okay, I've rebuilt your bedrooms. Go find your bedrooms." And you know, he says, I'm rebuilding them. And Amy says, "Look, this time, can we lose the bunk beds?" And Rory nods. And the Doctor's like, "No, bunk beds are cool. You know, bed with a ladder. You can't beat that. Go on."
Doctor, this time could we lose the bunk beds?
No, bunk beds are cool. A bed with a ladder. You can't beat that.
That's the kind of thing I would never have written pre-Matt. But having an idea of the things that Dr. 11 thinks are cool, he would love bunk beds.
Now, Neil Gaiman's hair is amazing, and that's all I really want to say to preface this next clip. I mean, listen to what he has to say about the Doctor, but really, just look at his hair.
You want to write the Doctor as being smarter than the viewer. You never want somebody sitting at home going, "Oh, don't do that, you idiot. It's through there." Because he's the Doctor and he's smarter than you are. But by the same token, it's kind of fun sometimes to have him being one step ahead of you, but he's still one step behind the plot.
One thing with television is that at the end of the day, it has to be doable on a specific budget, and unfortunately, that did lead to a few compromises in terms of Neil's episode.
I wrote a great scene in the TARDIS swimming pool that you will never see. And the zero-room sequence, it was awesome. And even up to the table read, we had the Planet of the Rain Gods sequence, and I think the Planet of the Rain Gods has gone into the realms of all of the other Doctor Who scenes that have ever been imagined and written and then were thrown out because they couldn't afford to shoot them.
But obviously, with the Doctor Who budget and the timescale that they have, it's pretty incredible that the show even manages to get made.
Every 2 weeks, they do the impossible. Every 2 weeks. It's not like a TV series where you make the same thing. You know, you have a bunch of spies and they're doing roughly the same spy-ish thing every week, or you know, you have a bunch of con men and they'll do something cool and con man-y every week. This is Doctor Who. You don't know what you're going to get. What you get is an episode of Doctor Who.
Because Doctor Who is what it is and has the availability to pack so much into each episode, Neil's really taking advantage of that.
I don't know if I'm ever going to get to write another Doctor Who, so I want everything in there. So I want one that's got scary bits in, and I want it funny, and I want it to have exciting chasey bits, and I want it to make you cry, and I want it to make you happy even though you're crying, and I want it to do things you've never done before. And if I can, I'd like to do a few moments where you go, well, can you do that? Can you do that in Doctor Who? Well, suppose he just did.
At the core of it, I really like the fact that Neil just wants to write the best episode of Doctor Who that he can, and having written that episode will just be enough of a reward for him.
You know, if I'm ever in a taxi and the taxi driver says, oh, you wrote an episode of Doctor Who, which one did you write then? Did a Weeping Angels then? Which one did you do? I can say, no, I did the one where the Tardis turned into Sir Jones. I go, oh, I saw that, that was good. Yeah, that's really all I want.
Yeah.
It's a taxi, thumbs up from a taxi driver who remembers the episode.
And that's it, the end of the interview. Neil Gaiman, everyone. What a nice guy.
Thank you for your time. It's been lovely.
You are so welcome, Charlie. That was fun.
Thanks. Now you can go and explore the TARDIS.
I will. Charlie, everybody.